So, I think Oricorio could have been a better Pokemon, but it just doesn't live up to a lot of its potential. So, Oricorio is a special Pokemon that's sort of similar to Pokemon like Castform in that it has multiple forms and multiple toppings of the same Pokemon, but instead of being changed by something like a weather condition, it's changed by an item. So, in that sense, it's more similar to something like Thundurus. And from there, it has 4 types that all share the same moves and the same stats. The 4 types are Fire Flying, Electric Flying, Psychic Flying, and Ghost Flying. And if any of those really sound familiar, then that's because all 4 of those already exist in other Pokemon. And in my opinion, 3 out of 4 of these forms of Oricorio are all but useless, because they're simply outclassed by other Pokemon of their typing. So, first of all, we'll look at Oricorio's stats. They're actually not bad. Base 75 health mixed with base 75 defenses, or base 70 defenses on both sides, is actually fairly bulky for a fully evolved Pokemon. It really doesn't have much of a weakness other than that, but still yet, it just isn't as good as it seems, because other than the flying stab that it gets, it only gets 1 stab move of whatever type it is, and that's its own unique move called Revelation Dance. And because of that, Pokemon like Talonflame and Charizard will almost always outclass the fire version. Pokemon like Thundurus and Zapdos will outclass the electric version. Pokemon like Xatu and Sigilyph will always outdo the psychic version. But the Ghost version can actually do things that Drifloon, the only other Ghost flying type, cannot do. Which is why I think that the Ghost flying form of Oricorio is the only one that's still usable. So, if we look at the weaknesses for each, the electric flying version actually has the least weaknesses with 2, Rock and Ice. But honestly, I don't think it's near as useful as Thundurus or Zapdos will ever be, because it doesn't get Volt Switch, which is a very important move for electric types. It also doesn't get Thunder Wave or anything else that normally electric types carry that are very good for either support or just straight damage and momentum. Now, the Fire Flying version of Oricorio is double weak to Rock, and it's also weak to Water and Electric, which isn't bad, but it just isn't worth running over other Pokemon, and that's the biggest problem with Oricorio. It's not a bad Pokemon itself, because base 98 special attack and base 93 speed are respectable on their own. It's just so outclassed by other Pokemon of its type, and I think it would have been much better off if it had like a grass flying variant, or maybe an ice flying variant. Maybe those would be more useful. So we're going to go ahead and get into the set. I only made 1 set for this Pokemon because it was really the only one I could think of that would work. And perhaps there are more for doubles, but really its only ability, Dancer, is just far too situational to try to make an argument for. And if you weren't aware, what Dancer does is if you switch it in, or if it's in, and another Pokemon on the field uses a move with the word dance in its name, Oricorio will immediately follow up and use the same move without wasting its turn. So this is super useful for switching in on something like a Rabombi using Quiver Dance, maybe a Volcarona using Fiery Dance, or something using Swords Dance, but otherwise it really isn't useful at all. So the set I decided to make was a sweeper that will probably be useful in the lower tiers, perhaps RU or NU, but anything above that it just does not pack enough bulk or power for. And this is the Sensu version, which is the Ghost Flying type. It has a Life Orb to help it do as much damage as possible because it really needs it. It's a Timid Nature to max out its speed, and then we also max out its special attack and speed in its EVs. From there we give it Revelation Dance, which as I mentioned before is unique and matches its primary typing. So in this case it is a 90 base power special ghost type move. It also needs Air Slash or Hurricane as its other stab, and that really depends on if you'd rather have accuracy or power. And honestly, even though I hate using moves that are 70 accuracy, I absolutely despise Focus Blast and Hurricane. I would almost say it's necessary on this Pokemon just because you need the power that badly. Past this, it honestly gets no other special coverage other than, the usual normal moves that every Pokemon gets. So I just thought Calm Mind and Roost would be the best two moves to finalize the set, because there's only 6 Pokemon that resist both Ghost and Flying, being Tyranitar, its Mega Evolve, Ponyard, and Bisharp, and then the Heliolisk line. So really, it's very unlikely that this Pokemon will see any of those against it commonly, so it should always have at least one move that hits for neutral damage. The only other moves that this Pokemon really gets are U-Turn, which could potentially be useful in momentum purposes, but its physical attack really isn't anything stellar. It also gets Swords Dance and Agility in addition to Calm Mind, so it has a lot of options to set up, and that means Baton Pass could actually be very useful, maybe for the electric type Oricorio to be able to Baton Pass since it has the least weaknesses. Maybe that could be the other reason to use something other than the Sensu version, but really that's very situational, and to run a Pokemon just for Baton Pass is very, very risky and usually does not reward as well as people think it does, especially since Smogon passed the Baton Passing clause, which means you can't pass another stat with a speed boost. So really it's not as useful as it seems. Past this, it gets a few different support moves that could be handy depending on the team you have it on. So it gets Tailwind, so you can boost your speed for 4 turns and double the speed of your entire team. So if you wanted to run a Tailwind user and then U-turn out and get 2 turns of speed with any other Pokemon, you could do that. You could also run Feather Dance or Captivate, and I feel like these could be especially useful for doubles battles, because being able to have either your opponent's attack or their special attack, depending on the gender of the Pokemon, could be very useful in certain situations and could cause you to be able to deal a lot more damage because you wouldn't be taking enough of your own for them to knock out your Pokemon. And then, something I thought was strange is that this Pokemon actually learns Sandstorm. It doesn't learn any other weather move that I could see, but it can still learn Sandstorm, so perhaps you could use this on a sand team just to throw your opponent off guard and them not expect you to be able to set up the sand. But really, I just don't see this Pokemon doing a whole lot. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the design. I love how all 4 of these look. They all have their own personality even though they're the same Pokemon, and I really enjoy looking at them. Using them in battle is another story, sadly.